I would, at 10,000 a head, I will be able to cover 30 million people, the same amount of money. I've just moved it from one side, from the input side, to stimulate the consumption, so that government is now focusing on establishing standards, on ensuring that things are done the way they ought to do. And then when you stimulate consumption that way, you are able to drive a lot of private sector investment on the supply side.
Rather than the government sitting on the money.
Correct.
And doing appropriations every year, and we don't get results.
Correct. So the government will put the money into, create a mechanism that allows the money to flow into the private sector.
Isn't that what the NHS should do in the healthcare sector, where you're a qualified professional? Oh, that's a different conversation.
That's a different conversation. Let's stick with.
We put money in too many things.
Let's stick with the physical.
But why do you think healthcare, education, technology should be a focus right now for facilities management, public asset management, infrastructure maintenance?
Okay, so it's such a big elephant, right? So you want to say, okay, where do we start from? What is the focus? Like someone said, when you lose your healthcare, you lose your today. When you lose your education, you lose your tomorrow. Human development indicators, the highest human development indicators you want to look at is, you want to focus and ensure that your health and education is top-notch. The vice president has been leading the economic recovery and growth plan. I mean, I've looked at that very beautiful plan, but do you know that right inside of that plan, there's not a lot of talk. There's not even no talk about maintenance. Nobody has thought about all of these good things we want to do. How do we ensure that they maintain? And the vice president and that plan, points out the importance of education and healthcare. So we feel that let us go to the basics. Let us start. If we get the healthcare sorted, we will have a more productive workforce. If we get the education sorted, we would have we'll have a guarantee of tomorrow. We'll have a guarantee
of not losing tomorrow.
Of not losing tomorrow. That's why we're focusing this conversation on health and education right now. We don't intend for this to be the end. We intend for this to be the start of a movement.
If this is a policy advocacy moving forward, my question is about, we have a lot of you who are professionals. Folks say we have so many Nigeria's society of engineers, yet we don't have good roads in Nigeria. And everybody puts engineer as an engineer. So everybody's an engineer, but we don't have good roads. So the quality of roads built and the maintenance is very poor, yet this is no attack on the Nigerian Society of Engineers. But again, I just used that as an example, that we have so many of you who are professionals, we have qualified Nigerians, home and abroad. And so what is this conversation, this policy dialogue that I'm interested in listening in about bringing also investors and policymakers to the table? Would we have the National Assembly as part of this?
Okay, excellent. So
you talk about laws.
The key people that will be at the dialogue will be from the executive. So the technical conversation will be led by the Honorable Minister himself, the Honorable Minister of Power, Works and Housing, who has a primary responsibility for infrastructure. And then we have members of the House of Assembly. So we have someone from the Federal House of Assembly, and then we have someone from the Senate, and then we have a few people from a few states as well, from both the executive and legislature, to be part of this conversation, which we're hoping that if we establish the importance of the problem, we establish that there is a need for us to deal with that problem, then other bodies like NES, GLCC, that are part of it, will continue with the rest of us on this policy advocacy journey for us to hopefully come up with a national infrastructure and asset maintenance framework that will guarantee that all the very brilliant Nigerians that we have, and we got brilliant Nigerians, are able to bring to bear those skills to ensure that we maintain our roads, our schools, etc., etc. So it's not just spending money. How are you spending the money? Where are you spending the money? What are the policy guidelines? What are the laws that quarantine these funds from being misappropriated? Let me give you one example. So the National Health Act is one of the biggest conversations around healthcare at the moment. It was not signed by this government. It was signed by the previous government. no one is talking about which side of the divide you belong to, because everybody sees the benefit in that law, which is why we think that if we want to tackle the issue of maintenance, we need to start tackle from bottom up. When the laws are right, the policies are right, then the strategies are right, we will now see that it's not that we don't have the human capital to deliver the services, but then we've created the environment, the enabling environment, like people will say, to ensure that the money is properly spent.
Is it that we don't have enough money? If everybody talk about infrastructure gap, funding gap, is it that we don't have enough money, whether it is 10 billion, 100 billion, 1 trillion in a year?
Well, you see, my biggest worry is not the quantum of money, all right? You may have a lot of money. How are you utilizing the money? That is my issue. Like what I said just now, typically, if you take money from one side to the other, you have 300 billion, for instance, and you spend it in stimulation, right? You probably will get 3 to 4x of that in terms of investment. So you've taken your 300 billion and you've turned that sector into a 1.5 trillion just because you're spending it more efficiently. So I think our biggest conversation right now should not be the quantum of money. What we have, how can we use it to achieve the goals that we have in front of us? I don't, this is a very strong passion for me.
You've spoken so passionately about it. I'm looking forward to this policy dialogue. This looks like a very different conversation. Maybe it's not just about what you said, 1.5 trillion, like the minister says, but how really do we utilize it without just frittering it away all the time? Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best and the rest of the policy dialogue, Dr. Tunde Ayeye, who is the general manager, also is the group managing director of the International Facilities Services Group, and is part of that NESG initiative, and everyone put their heads together this week. You need to listen to that as well. Let's return to you after the break, looking at the marketplace.